It's great to have everyone with us today. So I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get started and announce our webinar. In case you signed up and you didn't know what you were signing up for, you're in for a fun treat today. We have our Clink Different Academy, and our focus is the US market. So if you're kind of wondering here, first and foremost, what Clink Different is, I'm pretty sure you're thinking, what the heck is this? It is a joint project with the EU, bringing in both Germany and Bordeaux. Now, if that doesn't make a lot of sense, the reasoning behind it is that both of these, region and country, are non-competing. So they have such different wines, they support each other. We're trying to bring awareness to both. That's what the Clink Different Academy is all about. Now, with the webinar today, our focus on the US, we're really looking at how consumer preference has shifted, how producers have responded, all of this in the wake of the pandemic. Now, it's really towards our US export market, but with our esteemed panelists, incredible panelists and experts, we'll probably have some of that around the world. So not just the US, even though that's our main focus. Now, as we move to the next slide here, I hope you're all with us. We'll have here just a quick note about making sure you know that this is recorded. Now, we say it's for quality insurance, all of that, record keeping. We just have to let you be aware legally that we are recording it. True purpose is so that you can watch this again if you want. You can tell others about it. It is going to be housed on the clinkdifferent.com website. Probably 2 to 3 days, you'll be able to go there and find this again, as well as all the other seminars. Now, next, just so you know a little bit of housekeeping with Zoom, I'm pretty certain everyone's probably been on a Zoom webinar. So this is old news, but in case you need a little reminder, just please keep in mind, our focus is going to be with the chat. So we prefer to use that, not the Q&A. A fun little trick with this is that while we're going through the webinar, if our experts are able to answer in the chat field, they will do so immediately. We'll also have a dedicated section at the end. We'll get to all your questions, but just please use the chat, not the Q&A as we go forward. Next, we're gonna practice. We're gonna get that going. I know we've got some comments coming in already, but our question here to get that chat in full use, how have your wine purchasing habits changed compared to pre-pandemic? So put a few thoughts in there if you want. It's always interesting to see what everyone has to say. Now that we've got the practice going, let's go ahead. I should introduce myself. I'll start with that and then we'll go to the panel here. But the next slide, as we're moving to that next slide, I'll start with me. My name is Laura Williamson, and I'm here to lead our incredible team of experts forward on this topic. So let's start with Pierre Casanova. He is with Chateau Palumi. And Pierre, just say a quick hello for a second, and your chateau, where you're located in Bordeaux. Just a quick intro for you. Oh, you're on mute. You get to unmute yourself.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Excuse me. So my name is Pierre Cazeneuve. I'm a wine grower in the Médoc regions, which is in the northwest part of Bordeaux, near the Gironde and on the other side on the ocean. And I am personally located on the south of this Médoc regions, around a little bit south of Margaux. I'm producing on 40 hectares, which is approximately a little bit more than 100 acres, and producing organically now around 200,000 bottles.
Thank you so much, Pierre. Now, our next expert to be introduced, Yumna Asali. Please come on and say hello from Chateaubriand.
Hello, Laura. Thank you for having me. And it's a great group you have together here. We're very honored to be part because unlike Pierre, I don't qualify as a winemaker. I qualify as an accidental vineyard owner. That is because we fell in love with the Chateaubriac. The property is what in America you would call a boutique winery. It's 20 minutes east of the center of Bordeaux in an area called the Première Côte de Bordeaux, which is the first ridge that falls into the River Garonne. We're at the highest point, 93 meters, and it's a very small 25 acres at the most vineyard. We produce red wines, a very small confidential quantity of sweet wine, botrytis, under the appellation Cadillac. And we like to think that we produce the Rolls Royce of the Cadillacs, but that's, a bit of trumpet blowing here. And then an equally confidential 3-barrel production of dry white wine.
Fantastic. Fun.
Thank you.
And now we'll go to Andrea Verscheen of Weingroup Verscheen in Iphofen, Germany. Andrea.
Hi, hello. I'm from Franconia. We have an old family business. It is, this funny shaping bottles, a little bit like these Portuguese bottles. We are almost 400 years there in a family working in our vines, and we produce mostly white wine. So the Versching family has always focused on Silvaner, which is a crazy grape, a little bit like, but anyway, we tell that later. Something special anyway.
Thank you. Perfect. And now, out of University of Geisenheim, we have Professor Dr. John Hoff with us. Welcome, Professor.
Yes, hello. Great honor to be here. Geisenheim University is a specialized university on viticulture and enology. I do have the chair on international marketing management, and also had a bachelor's degree on international wine business, which also shows that we are quite connected to not only the German wine business, but the global universe of wine production and selling.
Great. So you can already tell we have an incredible lineup here to discuss this wonderful topic. So we'll get to that. As we move forward with the next slide, we'll go ahead and just give you the agenda. This is where we're headed here on our path. So obviously, first on the forefront is the impact of COVID on the US market. And with particular respect to consumer behavior and the unique sales channels that we've kind of seen arise from this, and how this is still shifting. And then, of course, we definitely need to have the producer response. That means our panelists here. How are they integrating with this? What have they been doing to handle this? And our final topic is, what does the future look like? Are these changes here to stay? And if not everything, what do we expect from this? Now, after that, of course, I promised that dedicated Q&A. We will again do our best to answer questions as we move through the whole webinar. So feel free to pop them in and use that chat button, the chat feature, and we'll definitely work on those. Now, just to give us a backdrop here, we've had a lot of research handed our way with the impact of how COVID has hit our US market, the world in general. So let's just dive into some of our learnings. The next slide will show us a pretty interesting fact here. Now, I know that this is a small graph, a small picture. We've got, in addition to the US, you'll see that kind of in the gold color, Australia in the purple, the UK in the blue, Canada's featured there in that darker blue, Germany's in red. So as you look here, what we're trying to point out is that consumption for wine has grown in ways that have shifted. We know this, but importantly, there's more occasions that have been chosen to uniquely situate wine as the beverage choice, but also those occasions are not necessarily within meals, outside of meals. Now we'll dive into that a little bit more. There's lots of levels to it. This is just to tell you that what we've seen, and if you look at that huge kind of spike there, I know it's hard to see, but that's in August where it goes up quite a bit. That shows that in August of 2020, we kind of thought we were seeing the case number decline in terms of the spread of the virus. A lot of people started to celebrate. They definitely increased that consumption, the occasion, on a regular basis. And then we see it curtail a little. But all in all, the whole span, we are up in the US by 3%. Now we happen to be one of the lower, I believe it's Australia, it's up 15%. So pretty interesting though. We are up, that's the key. So that's the backdrop that we'll give you. Now, as we go to the next slide, we're gonna see a little bit more detail here. So some of the consumer behavior we've broken into 3 categories. And it's important to just touch on this as the foundation, that you have that full feel of it. Now we know that this has come from off-premise, e-commerce. That's just to give you the idea of how badly on-premise was hit. It was off by 45%. So that's already pretty dire, but it's good to see that 76% of people that were surveyed said they're ready to return as soon as we can get that there. Now, what we have seen though with this increase is people are starting to enjoy wine and celebrate even 4 weeks in advance of holidays. I think that's pretty crazy. So in terms of Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve, St. Patty's Day, even Cinco de Mayo, 4 weeks, up to 4 weeks, there was a surge in sales. Now, a lot of this surge, if you look at the digitization, that's critical, 167% growth in e-commerce. Well, we knew that that was happening. That was our main artery for purchasing. Now, virtual tastings have been at the helm of this, direct to consumer, up 31%. Even wineries in the US have gotten uniquely centered in their wine clubs, trying to create other tiers, making it less exclusive for attendees. Of course, we know social media, IG, more postings really just about everyday experiences, not needing a special occasion, just trying to cope with the challenges of everyday's bad news, really. Now, what is fascinating, we can see here, premiumization. Really, a higher per bottle spend was the outcome because consumers were not dining out or going on vacation. They did tend to turn more locally. Regional wines were kind of the preferred choice. They felt more comfortable with that. There was less in-store tasting, obviously. We didn't have samples, in-store samples, so they didn't experiment quite as much. One factor I thought was fascinating, gifting up 600%. So with that, buying gifts and having those delivered, pretty amazing. Now that is our backdrop here. So let's go to our next slide. And I'll just tell you a little bit here with, oops, I think we went one too fast here. Yes, okay, great. So I would really like to just bring in a little bit of discussion now. Professor Hom, since we've seen this, I'm curious if you will tell us in your words what you're finding with your research. I know we're kind of looking at the US market. Is anything different, or is what you're finding supporting this, or what would you like to add to this?
Yes, thank you very much. I think a lot of the general findings that take more global look or picture is quite going in the similar ways. I think what you observed is an increase in comparison to 2019. However, we have to see that 2019 was a record low. It was kind of global consumption was down 10 to 15% in total. So we are trying to catch up with the former demand. On the other hand, we had already beforehand a global surplus, so we have to be very careful. And I think what we do see is that, and I think we will see later on is some responses from the producers, that there is quite some, let's say, pressure on the supply chain, and you needed to find good answers. And I think you mentioned in the last slide already one that people are nowadays looking for, on the one hand, for sure, good quality, but we have to admit that quality is kind of some necessary attribute of any wine that you want to sell. And I think you need to add special issues such as the brands, images, some kind of emotional connection to the consumers. And I think this is very important. And you mentioned very much that we see kind of an increase in, let's say, online sales mechanisms, not only sales, but also marketing communication. I think what we do see is here you have the platform for being much more exposed to the consumer. On the other hand, the consumers also had the time to search for better prices. It's a very price sensitive channel. So maybe we can also ask about that. And I think my last remark really goes a little bit towards the point of higher prices. We have seen or experienced higher tariffs and taxes. And I think we have to be careful in just saying that people are willing to pay more. It's a price level effect, what we rather see. And maybe the last remark is a bit kind of, we see a bit more on domestic or kind of an increase in home consumption. At the same time, we also see a little bit more of concerns on alcohol consumption via regulation. So I think this has to be also taken in case, and kind of particularly there is maybe the threat of seeing more excise taxes on wine.
Wow, all amazing points. Thank you for that insight. I always love to hear, especially with all the research that you're doing, and it's a worldview, so it's always fascinating. Thank you. Now, Andrea, I know you really started to incorporate virtual tastings just to kind of connect and stay aware and interactive with your clients. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was a fascinating thing. The thing that I had not expected is that it created a big number of new clients. And the reason for that was that we did it in a very personal and private way. So people could buy the tasting on our online shop or the online shop of our partners. And then they would get a package with bottles. So that this was something that people gave to their friends or fathers, grandfathers, you know, those people where you never know what you want to give them. And they gave it as a gift. And that was very good, because we got clients that would never come to our estate and taste, or to a wine shop and look for our wine. And of course, you have to tell stories, sure, history, I mean, German history, family history, etc., as well as some really good information. People appreciated good information about how can you taste, or why is the terroir important, etc., etc. But this was something that was very, very successful. And I think the most important thing was that I did a feedback at the end of the Zoom meeting. The Zoom meetings were kind of 1.5 hours. And then when people are talking to you and explaining which was their favorite wine, then they will remember the wine and they will buy it later. I mean, that's what we all wanted, you know. So in this personal exchange, not only a virtual thing that you can watch on YouTube or whatever, you know. So I thought this special thing was good, but on the other side, of course, I was 5 evenings per week. I'm at Zoom, you know. This, you know, Michel Barrage, he said, he said about Zoom happy hours. I had my happy hour every day. I mean, kind of, you know.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Really fun to hear that, especially the connection and making it special for your clients and guests. Now, Pierre, I'd love for you to kind of tell us a little bit about the way you felt storytelling was accelerated, your connection with your clients because of the pandemic?
I think yes. What I thought is, and it is what I think about the pandemic in general in France like that, but same thing for my US partners, is that the pandemic actually accelerated the thing that we already seen a little bit before, but it went a lot more faster. An example, in Bordeaux, and this is one of the subject, we had the notes, the critics, very powerful along the last 20 years, let's say, starting with Robert Parker. And I think the pandemic accelerated the fact that people would hear more about our story and the fact that we could actually tell other things that only critics. And I think this is something very important to us, because sometimes it is a little bit frustrating to have your own wine only synthesized by one note, good or bad, actually. And actually, I think the pandemic accelerated the fact that people would want to know what is behind the wine. And personally, I've been working a lot on environmental issues. We're producing organically, we're planting trees and things like that, and we try to do things on the way we produce. And I felt, and I don't know if it's exactly generalized, that people would be more keen on accepting and on taking our story more than uniquely critics' notes.
Great point. Very interesting. Thank you. And now, Yumna, I know you've shared with me that it actually kind of forced you to look for additional clients. With the shift, no on-premise, you actually extended to corporate and corporate sales. Tell us about that.
So when the lockdowns and confinements started last year in March, we were still in the process of building a brand, Chateaubiac, which we took over in 2006. And our first vintage was 2008, so it wasn't up for sale before 2011. So in the short period between 2011 and 2019, we managed to elbow in some wonderful markets. And then literally the carpet was pulled from under our feet in 2020, when we thought that we were nearly at cruising speed. And we had, unfortunately, our local post office ran short of staff, so we couldn't even, send. There was a real problem in trying to send wines to people. So we didn't do an online site or anything else, and we were really scratching our head. And come just before Christmas, we actually, since we're four in the family, my husband, myself, our son and our daughter working in Biak, we each contacted all our contacts who had companies, whether it was in New York or London or France or Switzerland, for instance, or Germany. And we did it quite a while beforehand. I mean, we really tried to get in before anybody else caught on the idea or was more adventurous. And that helped a lot, actually, to boost our sales. Because people were, of course, stuck at home, couldn't buy gifts. Online shopping was, of course, very rife, but people were trying to gift, and everybody needed a bottle of wine for Christmas or New Year's, or champagne, but we don't produce champagne. So we said, and especially that our price point of our wines is not excessive for a Bordeaux wine. It's middle of the range. So it was a very possible gift for a lot of corporate companies. The other thing that we took advantage of doing was, because all the restaurants were closed, the restaurant teams actually had more time to explore vineyards. So we started also to sow the seeds for when reopening was going to take place by inviting these restaurant teams that otherwise are impossible to get to come and spend the day in Biak and do a proper tasting instead of doing a 20-minute tasting in a restaurant. But the corporate thing was very important for us. Of course, we had a big problem because Brexit took place.
Yes.
So our English market, and that added another level of problems in the logistics, because right until now, to send wine to England is very complicated from France.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the corporate idea was definitely a good one, and I hope that we can expand on this actually.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Really wonderful insights. Very helpful.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on just to a couple of slides here, and then we'll come back to our discussion. So as we move forward, we'll just kind of tell you here a little bit about those new sales channels. Some of that was already mentioned, but if you think about it, some of the largest producers in the world are hotels and restaurants. That's our on-premise. When that was totally shut down, of course, it was a huge disruption to supply. So we'll have Professor Honk talk about that in just a moment, but one other attribute we noticed, larger businesses really rebounded a little easier than our smaller wineries and businesses. So the way that smaller wineries suffered was a little bit more disproportionately higher than the larger, that were able to kind of push very quickly to the sales channels online. And then, of course, we already talked about direct to consumer, e-commerce. But again, when winery website changes, we'll come back to that in just a moment, and how that was really a focus for some as they realized they had to shift quickly without realizing how everything changed overnight. So let's go to our e-commerce next. And we're going to just touch on this, and then we're going to come back to Professor Homp real fast. Just to kind of remind you here, with e-commerce, we'll have you, Dr. Homp, in just a moment, talk about supply chain disruption, but just to summarize our e-commerce real fast for the US, Wine.com reported a 217% growth in the first half of 2020. That's outrageous. And then Naked Wine, another business that's really DTC, 65% up. And just to kind of give you an idea here, this chart that we're seeing, it shows, I know it's hard to read, but that huge pinnacle, that is the 3-month span that we've got noted as the fourth bullet here. The 3 months from March to May, that is the accelerated growth here in e-commerce that Drizzly reported. It was 10 years worth of expansion in 3 months. So that's just, again, a backdrop of e-commerce. Dr. Hump, let's have you come in and tell us about your thoughts on supply chain disruption, please.
Okay. Yes, I think you touched here a very sensitive and very important topic. I think overall, I mentioned beforehand, we face a global supply surplus, and we had then a situation in 2019 when suddenly a very important customer broke away. And we saw it in different markets, but I also saw it in some US market that there were already some stocks building up before 2019. And then with this huge catastrophe, we can say that there was no sales in the on-premise sales channel. Suddenly we had such a pressure in the whole system, and still have, that there is kind of the big issue is how to deal with the stocks. And what we see is that maybe sometimes the shelf price itself is not affected, but you have quite a lot of price promotions, like getting 2 for 1 or other price promotion, and hence we do see that one response is to shift sales via price. And the other is that some of the quantities have been move to other outlets. And one was, you mentioned it, food retail, which were gaining foothold in the whole crisis, and the other was then e-commerce. But as you have also shown, that e-commerce is also going back to a certain extent. So we have to be very careful to see what are the long-term effects on the whole development. But for sure, the big question is how to deal with the stocks, not only in the US, but also in other markets, and how to make ensure that you still can sell from a producer point of view, that you have ongoing sales. And for the trade side, how to deal with stocks and not going too much into price.
Great, thank you so much. And I think I saw the last figure, just so everyone's aware, this wasn't on any of the slides, but wine represents, out of all the alcoholic beverages sold via e-commerce, 50% of that market. And then with grocery, like what Professor Hompe is saying, that actually represents actually I said that incorrectly, 55% of the total is wine, 50% of that is kind of within the grocery chain. That's what's spent on alcohol. So grocery, we saw that became a really pivotal part in terms of ordering, picking up, contactless ordering and pickup, that sort of thing, which we hadn't really heard of before, or at least for a lot of the alcohol sales that we're aware of. So thank you for bringing that up. Now, we'll move on to our next slide. We're going to bring the growers here next with our responses. So let's just talk a little bit about, do we have on our next slide? I'm trying to remember. Yes, we have our considerations that we'll have the growers kind of touch on for us. So we've outlined these here with financial impact for sustainability and the updates to websites, really trying to expand virtual tastings and grab your consumers that way. Then we know the social platform became indispensable. But I know it was touched by Professor Hompe that email communications, these newsletters, even phone calls returned to being critical, and people were actually picking up the phone for a change. So we're going to bring in the producers. Pierre, I'd love to start with you if you don't mind, and have you talk about sustainability a little bit. This is always a very soft spot in my heart because we know that climate change is really pending and important and critical. So tell us a little bit about your perspective. We have heard from research that some have had to rechannel their finances, which we know sustainability takes a little bit of finance to move forward. Some have had to curtail that a little just to redirect and, you know, help themselves with the changing situation of the pandemic.
Well, yes, unfortunately, and all of the things that you're talking about are taking a lot of energy and finance, building new websites and working differently and working environmentally, producing organically or not even organically, but doing all those environmental issues are for us very important, but sometimes could be a little bit difficult. And I made the choice not to change anything, but we were talking about it just before the webinar. We have a difficult years at the moment, but if you look at things since 2017, we had very difficult years and losing some yields. So yes, I have some friends that sometimes had to maybe put on the side a little bit their conversions or their investments in order to face other financial issues, maybe more short-term issues. But I didn't make this choice, and I would say that most of my neighbors, my friends, didn't do that, even though it has been difficult, because we do believe that whatever it takes, we need to pass on. So yes, some of them have done this, and this is sad news to hear, but I would say most of my friends, like me, tried to not to stop anything and to continue, even though, yes, along the last 5 years, we lost, let's say, more than 2 normal yields on average, and it's been difficult. But we do believe that anyway, if we have difficult years, it's because the climate is changing. So if we don't do anything, then we have worse things. So we are actually obliged to do it, but let's be frank and honest. Some of us had to postpone for a few years their investments because times could be very difficult. Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to hear that it was less common, at least in your vicinity. I've been reading some reports, and it is heartbreaking to hear that. So now, Andrea, let's have you tell us a little bit. I know we talked to you about, you used to travel extensively into the US. I know that well. I've seen you in action quite a few times. So tell us a little bit about how your life changed without that.
Well, I hated not to travel to the US, actually. And no, of course, that saved us a lot of money. I mean, normally I would do a 2-week tour in the springtime to support our sales reps, or I go to the Wine Spectator, Wine Experience, Grand Tour, whatever. So it saved us money, which I invested in social media, in a new website, etc. And of course, in supporting our importer, because it was really a coincidence, but our old importer gave up and gave it, and now we have a new importer, the German Wine Collection. And they just started when the COVID came, and so they had nothing. What could they do, And so I said, okay, let's try to get these tariffs, pay half of the tariffs so that you don't have to raise your prices. And I know it has been so hard for our partners in the US to do that. So I think that is important. And the other thing is, of course, as Pia said, with the climate change, we have to invest into other techniques in the vineyard, more hard work, because we have a taste profile, and I cannot, as a German producer, cool climate producer, I cannot say, oh, I make Italian wine. This is stupid. So yeah, there is a challenge, but on the other side, I'm very optimistic. I think the US market has a wonderful potential, and I see that the style to consume wine is trend. So yeah, I think we have to spread the word, as Pia said, as Yumna said, and we will have a great future together.
Thank you. And now, Yumna, I'd love to bring you in on this. You kind of mentioned, sometimes we forget with the pandemic because it's been so intense, but it was already challenging for you, all of you here, because of the tariffs. So kind of link that in, what you had to do, all in the midst of trying to build your brand, what you were facing and how you handled that.
Well, being a small vineyard and being really hands-on and with our children, that also makes it maybe easier, because it is our lives. Actually, this vineyard, we never intended to make wine, and we weren't looking for a vineyard, but Chateaubiac is truly a very, very how should I say, it's a bubble out of time, and it really takes your heart, and we otherwise, we would never have complicated our lives as as it turned out to be. But I think human beings are not made to live alone, and the pandemic probably showed that to us more. People who are coming out of this confinement, this several confinements, isolation, it has left scars on people. And I think for us, it was very important to keep talking to our distributors, especially more than the distributors, really, the sommeliers, who were our best ambassadors. I think because they had complicated lives. From one day to the next, restaurants closed. They didn't have a job anymore. So we did a lot of online tastings. We got in touch with them. We stayed in touch with them, and that was the great technological wonder of the WhatsApp conversation allows you to call people without spending money, really. At least not like when I was a child, you had to call from, one country to another, and it was so expensive. You only did it once a month or something. So I think for us, we had reached in 2019, we'd reached a point where we had a very solid base of sommeliers and distributors who had come to Biak, stayed in Biak, and I dare say were vaccinated in Biak medicine. And we just kept in touch as we would do, as if they were part of the family. And the response was very touching, really, because a lot of them changed their lives. Some of them are not going back to being sommeliers. They've changed countries or they've changed areas. But we have to remember that wine is a living thing that human beings like to share. And I think this was the big problem, is that we couldn't be there to share our experience. So we did it online a lot.
Thank you. Very important to just remind us, because this beverage is so linked with being social and sharing our favorite bottles, those special bottles we hold on to. Those are best with others. So
Laura, I see a question that comes well with that topic from Martin Harrow. Does anyone worry about the upwardly trending stats on Americans' over-reliance on wine and spirits? They are marketing products in pet stores now via plush toys. So is there, Martin, I really, I'm not so good in my English that I can really understand it completely, but Laura, maybe you can help us.
Well, I'm not sure I understand that either. Anyone on the panel? Professor Humph, do you understand the question? I didn't have it right here in front of me. Anyone want to take a stab at it? We can always come back to it too in just a moment.
Okay. Yeah, maybe you can clarify it a bit.
Yes, okay, put in the chat, clarify it just a bit. I think I'm even a little confused.
Okay.
So we'll
then there's another question, Laura. There is a question from Andrew Chalk, and he says, has the sommelier profession been bettered?
Oh, that is a very huge topic. I think it's too soon to discuss that. Hold that question. Let's come back at the end and touch on that just a little. I think there's still so many undulations going on right now, especially with the Delta surge, and it's still hard to say, maybe, but that is a loaded question because I think we hope that it is, but I can't answer that 1000% accurately. My hope is it is better for sommeliers. Okay, so
you will. But I see the other question has been cleared somehow. Some pet stores carry white paw plush toys, sell wine for doggies.
Oh my God.
I heard about doggies drinking beer too, but wine might be a push. I love it.
Actually, I have to say, we had an alcoholic dog, a hunting dog, and he was an alcoholic. You could only have a nice time with him when he was drunk, Yeah.
That's hilarious. All right, well, let's come to our last section here. This is kind of we won't really dwell on the slides too much. We're really talking about, are these changes here to stay? And, no one has a crystal ball. I think one little tidbit I've learned here is ease and access. What makes our life easy? We're all about having something be easier, especially during the pandemic when everything seemed to be very hard and challenging. So I kind of look at that from a backdrop. That's just my personal view. But we don't have any slides associated with this, so we're just going to kind of open it up to our panel again, just letting you know we're here on this topic, and maybe Professor Dr. John Hoff, I'll start with you and let you kind of tell us your thoughts based on your research and where it's pointing.
I think in the moment it's not totally clear where it's pointing at. I think what we see to a certain extent that it's rather that trends that emerged before Corona has been kind of maybe catalyzed and are maybe more clear to observe. But I think it's on very few that really kind of emerge newly. I think, as you mentioned before, e-commerce or so, but they had been there. They had now been kind of really kicked off, but it's not that something totally new emerged. I think this shift from on-trade to off-trade, I think this is maybe something that really can be purely pinned down to Corona, but I think one has to be very careful, again, to say this in that manner. But I think we mentioned lots of the main things. I just was kind of reading a bit what has been discussed in the chat, and I think it's the one connection that had been made there. Kind of, we have to be very careful in the issue of kind of how to sell our product and how to sell it, how to market it, and it's not only towards, let's say, kids, but it's in general. We have to be very, let's say, careful in seeing what is wine, and it's an alcoholic product, and so we have to be careful. And what I would observe now is that we will see a bit more aggressive selling due to what we mentioned before, is the high stocks and maybe also a bit the need to sell. I think we will see here kind of two development, that on the one hand we see a development that people like to have some more wine or alcohol in general, and on the other hand we do see a lot of people with this lifestyle of health and sustainability, where the healthy part is getting more and more important, and people are concerned about the consumption of alcohol. So I think we have to find a good way to communicate and respond to this.
Great points. And yes, Pierre, we'll let you go next, and everyone's going to have a say. So
I'm not, I mean, of course, I'm not an expert like the professor, but I do believe that environmental productions manners are here to stay, and there's no way we can change this. I do believe that internet is going to take a big part of the new, but I do believe also that we are in the middle of something, because from what I see at the moment is that sometimes when you see, I hope that they're not going to be only websites to sell our wines, because from what I see a little bit in the United States, but also in France, and it's quite similar, is that it's very price driven. And I think it's a big challenge for us also to explain what we're doing and how we're producing. And I do believe that this is only made, I mean, it's going to be difficult, and I do believe that human advisors like sommelier or people in the shop are here also to make this story happen, and these messages. And I no doubt digitalizations and things are going to go even further, but I do believe that we need to invent a way to pass our messages, and I very optimistic on the fact that human needs to do that, and I think we need to invent, because otherwise we will be only driven by prices, because on the internet you only can make one note critics and a price, and maybe your label if it looks nice and anything, but I think messages needs to be passed by humans.
Yeah.
I think that's a very important point, and sometimes we overlook that. But you know, in our pre-COVID days, it really was that human connection that helped tell the story of the grower. Maybe not larger brands, but you know, it really was that connection of the sommelier tableside or with their clients, or in retail, very valued salesperson that loved the wine, that told the story, that helped encourage that client to purchase and take a chance. Very important. So, Yumna, would you like to speak next?
Thank you very much. I agree with Pierre. You know, I think that if anything, this pandemic has reminded people to take time and to take stock and to slow down and to think. I think we had reached in the Western world, or the Western, let's say, philosophies, we had reached such a speed of life of every day. I mean, one telling thing was, the number of people on Instagram who were baking bread. I mean, it was, everybody's rediscovered the joys of making bread, it was like a necessity, like a an urge to come back and to plant and to know what you were eating and eat, and show the world that you were able to make something as simple as bread. And I think that it has really made people stop and think. And I think that it was really very telling in that sense. And this is something that will stay with people. I think habits are going to change. I agree with Pierre that we really don't want wines to be sold just, through internet and mechanically, because wines involve the life of every grower 360 days a year. I mean, every day we sweat, every day we worry, every day we're agricultural, we're dependent on weather, on so many factors that we can't control. So it has to we have to find a way to keep the humanity involved with the wine selling. And in fact, I think for us in Biak, this has been one of the we didn't go for the usual people who put notes, who mark the wines. We have very little mark references. We prefer to sweat and place every bottle telling the story of every bottle. And I think this is what in the end touches the heart of the consumer.
Thank you. Very true. I agree. Andrea, would you like to add your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I was just trying to type it. The thing is, I think COVID really forced us to find new channels to tell our stories. And I mean, of course, we all want to tell the stories to the same kind of people. I mean, our target group is the consumer. But what I think was the great thing that we started to work, to cooperate with our partners, because when they wanted to tell their consumers, their customers, the stories, then we could help and just, bring the information. And I think that's something very good. And I think that will stay. It is easier. So the sommeliers, the sommeliers that travel, etc., they know a lot. But a lot of the knowledge is a kind of a book knowledge, and now you can tell the stories of these people, which I think is new and better.
Great. And I can speak for myself that not being able to travel, it has opened my door in terms of being able to reach more consumers. The events that I do, connect them with all these unique wines, and not have to travel to hold the in-person event. So instead of having, one event a week, I might have 3 in a day and reach, unmeasured amounts because there's no maximum on the virtual platform. So I think that is an incredible attribute that we might see woven into our existence more and more, just to create greater access than what we had pre-pandemic. So that's just a thought I had on that too.
Yeah.
So I know, let's just go to our last few slides, because then we're going to open it up. This chat line is wonderful. There's so many things that we can touch on in the chat. So we'll just kind of sum up here. We really can see it's pretty obvious with our takeaways that the supply chain issues, those are not resolved yet. We know that that's going to be ongoing. It's not like once we feel COVID has ended, a light switch turns on and everything goes back to normal. We already were dealing with the tariffs when the pandemic hit. It's just a jigsaw puzzle and trying to figure that out. So we know that that is going to be a challenge. Then we have to realize online sales are going to be critical. We know that we talked about that human connection needing to be part of it, but I think the ease in which many consumers have found with the online potential, I don't think that's going to go away too quickly because it does create ease in our lives. Now, the last touch, we know we're not back to normal until we have our on-premise back. There is no normal with that because it really is a part of our life that most cherish and have missed dearly. And when the floodgates opened, we saw that huge surge for on-premise. Now, let's just talk a little bit about opportunities here. For Bordeaux and Germany, I think part of this goes back to what Andrea was touching on, the styles. And then, of course, Pierre with sustainability. All of these are key selling points for Bordeaux and Germany. So if we can keep that communication up, I think for these areas, country and region, that's going to benefit them. Now, the other attribute is that there's value across the board that is so easy to enjoy and embrace and offer immediate gratification. So we just have to get that message through to the consumer. If it's online and we have to push them that way, we have to continue to say that message and let them understand that. But I think that those are key opportunities here that both Bordeaux and Germany will benefit. So I think that's really our presentation in terms of the slides and the wrap up. We just will kind of give you a little reminder here on the next slide. I'll be kind of taking the discussion to biodiversity, organic production, and biodynamic practices. That next seminar for Clink Different with Bordeaux and Germany is September 15th at 1 p.m. Just a little bit of note about today. So out of all the attendees from today, we're going to have 2 spots. So please fill out your survey. You have to attend the whole seminar, fill out your survey. 2 people will be chosen for a VIP seminar that will be in a few more months down the road, but it'll be a special seminar. You'll receive wines. It'll be a very small group, about 20 people. Now, I think that's all of our housekeeping. So we're going to go to our full Q&A here. So now on our chat, I'm going to pull up my chat again and just see if you haven't asked your question, please go ahead. And I think we can discontinue our slideshow now and let's go ahead and have all the panelists here. We're not quite finished. We're going to dive into the chat a little bit more. We're hoping that you have some more questions for us now. If not, I'll create some, don't worry. But feel free. Have I missed any that we should touch on from you guys? Anything that I've missed that you saw come through that?
Yeah, I saw one. Here's, sorry, I cannot see your name. It's just a D that I can see, but she or he says, our family owned and operated a business established in 1939 and is hoping to expand the service to include visits, etc., etc. Not reading the whole thing, but we have a TV in our wine room, can connect to the internet and host live interviews and meetups, yet was never able to coordinate this with distributors, importers, and producers. I would like to have advice as to the best way to move forward with this idea. I think that's a great thing. I mean, that is exactly, I was really wondering because not so many people came and asked for it. I thought there would be much more.
Oh, okay, I missed the part of the question. Who was asking, what is their role in the industry? Do we know what they're...
Yeah, they have a shop.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Well, I think if you own a shop, you kind of have to start with your favorite producers and who you might want to work with. Reach out to producers specifically, those that you have wines that you already love, so that you can try to coordinate an event like that. And then if you have an email-based client list, you would then send those emails out. But I would be starting with the producers that I really want to work with. I don't know if that was the point of the note there. It was a long question.
It was Danette at Sally's, Cape Cod Package Store, Fine Wines.
Got it.
So it was Danette. Yeah. And I think she should, just start and ask. They're always
I agree. Reach out.
Happy winemakers to tell their stories in your shop.
Yes.
Pierre, we would do it, wouldn't we?
Yes.
Of course. Of course.
Of course.
That's what we want.
I do see another question that's pretty interesting. Shelley is asking, okay, so one talked of the humans to give wine advice, but this can be done on the internet with chat or even a phone call too. So why would internet sales not provide this? I think part of that is we got so used to having offshore assistance with a lot of platforms that then to weave it back to smaller contacts and having true connection was a really hard redirect. Now, I'm not an expert on that, but I'm just guessing in terms of that.
There's Diane Bracken was saying that internet could do the connection that a human could do, and she was reacting on the fact that I would say that human would be should be in the center of the advice. I'm not saying that internet cannot do the job. I do believe that internet is going to evolve. I'm just saying that at the moment, maybe this is the first step of the wine selling on the internet, and it's a little bit too much wine price driven yet. And then I'm not saying that it's not impossible. I guess internet has proved us that nothing is impossible. And I'm sure a lot of things could be invented, but I do believe that at the moment, for me, I like to buy wine on the internet also, but it's usually wine that I already know. Discovering is always difficult yet. I'm not saying that it's impossible, and I'm sure people will invent nice way to do things, but at the moment, I'm a little bit, I do believe that my wine advisor, wine merchant advisor makes a better job yet.
I'm glad to hear that, because there is artificial intelligence out there working, but I still don't think it can supersede humans in that ability to connect and recommend based on personal preference.
But internet can help. I mean, as Andrea said,
absolutely, it can help.
Laura, there's another question. Have you noticed a shift with consumers recognizing the price gaps between restaurants and retail?
I would love to hear you guys, the growers, on this. What do you think? Are they surprised in terms of the retail? Because we know that wine lists look more expensive, and then when consumers start to purchase online, they probably notice, wow, they're saving a lot of money, and that could be funneling some of the quote premiumization as well. Any thoughts?
Oh, I haven't had any feedback with regard. I mean, some restaurants really probably go overboard in multiplying the price of wines, and people are, of course, quite surprised. But I think restaurants that do that are a bit short-sighted in their philosophy, because it actually it's service they're doing to themselves and to the growers. They're killing the wine. I think they have it's a short-sighted strategy, really. If they do that, it's much better to get wines to move and for the consumer to have a choice that he can afford, because more and more people are going out to restaurants, well, when they'll be open again, of course, and they'll want to be able to afford good bottles at a reasonable price. I don't know, what do you think?
I do. This is a very important question, and price transparency is one of the big issue, and I'm sure professor would have an idea on that. It's just, I'm not saying about the pandemic, but internet and digitalization of the price has been as transforming the transparency of the price. And yes, we need to, I don't know, this is a very big struggle because that means every part of the logistics needs
Chain.
to, they need to earn money. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes on the internet, you think that there's everything, there's no margin inside, but paying salespeople, paying advisors, paying things, and people needs to have these margins. And sometimes, and not only in the United States, but in France, for example, yes, some people are a little bit confused about price and differences of prices. And I think internet, and I do agree, we need to work on this very hard because sometimes consumers have difficulties to understand how price correlate between from the producers or from distributors. But I think we need to work on it. This is a very important subject, and it's here to stay because internet is pushing transparency.
Well,
So
I saw a funny comment here that sometimes